I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of retention as a service agency, Electric. Today I'm talking with Philip Portman, the CEO of Textdrip, a text-focused business growth platform. Philip, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me today, Brandon.
So before we dive into some of these specific topics, can you give everybody just a quick background on yourself and Textdrip?
Yeah, absolutely. So we founded and built Textdrip because majority of the platforms out there were focused around email and phone. So we, through our analysis, realized those are kind of archaic platforms for outreach. Text messaging has the highest response rate. So we built our platform around text messaging, still including, phone outreach and that as well, but text messaging being the center of everything we do. It coincided with big changes in the business texting industry called 10DLC. It's something that all the carriers have put into place, guidelines that business texting needs to follow. And so we set up Textdrip to follow along those guidelines. And the idea being that if we follow these guidelines, we'll have the best deliverability in the industry. And we have. And so it's been some really great growth. We've had a chance to help some businesses grow their business beyond what they thought was possible. And it's been a pretty interesting journey.
And are you primarily working with e-commerce brands or B2B companies, or what is your target market?
Yeah, absolutely. So our bread and butter is insurance, mortgage, solar sales, and real estate. Those are our primary customers because they do a lot of texting with their clients. But really anybody looking to reach their customers from different platform, be it their customers or especially nowadays, new employees, applicants. We've been doing a lot in the recruiting space. Because let's be honest, everyone's got their phone on them, and responding through a text message to a job application is a heck of a lot easier than a phone call or an email or one of the other methods that people have been using for a really long time.
And is it primarily for prospecting and getting people to convert, or would you say there's a fair amount of retention strategy baked into the texting programs that these businesses are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a drip campaign. So you think about email drip campaigns, and the reason why they're effective is it usually takes 3 or 4 times before someone responds to a campaign, right? Like you're in the middle of something, you're busy, you got to follow back up with that person, but you just don't have time. And then you forget about it. A few days later, another message pops in. So we're following the same strategy with text messaging. So you get that text message, but you know what? Now it's just not a good time for me to talk about your service. But maybe later on when I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, well, it's a much better time for me to talk about it. So that's why drip campaigns work. You can hit your prospective clients or existing customers or applicants at different times throughout the day, at different times throughout the week, until you find a time that fits for them that they're going to respond on it. So that's how they're using it in a variety of different capacities, and people are finding new ways to do it, be it real estate to insurance to solar sales is a really popular one that's taking off as the solar industry is really booming right now.
Got it. Well, that's fascinating. Aside from that, what are some of the other ways that you can see text growing some of these businesses?
Yeah, so the thing I would say with anyone looking into getting into text marketing is to do your research on it. There are a lot of regulations that you have to follow right now. At Textdrip, we help our customers out with that entire process. We manage the majority of it on our end from the customer service standpoint. But you want to make sure that you have good, short, concise messages when you're sending them out. A lot of people are trying to use like an email message in a text format, but that's not really what texting is about. Texting is conversational, so you think about a conversation, You wouldn't go up to somebody in a party and say, "Hi, my name's Bill. I'm a licensed health insurance provider in 32 states. I can help you find the greatest policy, blah, blah." You wouldn't run on, you'd say, "Hey, how's it going? I'm Bill." It'd be really conversational, be short, it'd be back and forth. And that's really what text messaging was designed to be. But I see time and time again, people trying to build these text campaigns that are really long, drawn out, and they're not effective. So that would be one of the primary things I would look at if you're looking to start a text campaign. But also you want to make sure that you're following some of the compliance regulations as well. Most recently, campaign registry is something that they've enforced, and you have to tie your business texting to your business, specifically your business EIN. So it's important that you have a business registered with an EIN that you're attaching that phone campaign to. And that is a big change that's recently happened in the industry.
Are you seeing that compliance is probably the biggest roadblock to businesses getting off the ground and running with text messaging?
Yeah, because the frustrating part with it is this isn't something that's government regulated. This is regulated by the phone industry. And so you've got, T-Mobile, Verizon, Sprint, AT&T coming up with these guidelines, and they change constantly. As of 2 months ago, they changed something completely different. It used to be you could create multiple brand campaigns underneath a single business EIN. Well, all of a sudden, 2 months ago, they said, nope, we're changing that. And now you have to have your campaign registered under one single EIN. And that's what we're going to do. All of the rate limitations and stuff is based on that EIN. The problem with that is the documentation everywhere still says the old process, the old way of doing things. And so, yeah, the literature, the camp, everything's still getting updated constantly. So it's kind of a tough area to navigate right now. We're constantly putting out YouTube videos, updates, articles, and stuff from our end, because the only way we're catching some of this stuff is through actually testing on our end and then submitting multiple tickets to the providers saying, "Hey, I know you're saying it's this way, but this isn't actually what's happening in reality. Can you explain this to us?" Feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions, even if you're not a Textdrip customer. In the bottom right corner at textdrip.com, we've got a chat support. You can reach out to our team and we'll help guide you, even if you're not a customer of ours, on how to get your campaign registered and get your deliverability improved.
What are some of the missed opportunities or challenges you've seen brands and businesses run into?
Missed opportunities are really using text messaging. So in the sales industry, people have been using kind of the strategy of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And you have a younger generation now starting to come into that, because after COVID, a lot of people retired, a lot of people moved on from some of these industries. So you've got a younger generation moving in going, "I don't want to sit there and dial and make phone calls all day. I don't want to knock on doors. There's got to be a better way of doing it." And so this younger generation is looking at a way of, how can I take all of this non-revenue producing components of my business and automate it? And one of those ways that is obviously through Textdrip is automating your business. And I think that components that prevent people from moving up in business, there's really three things that I see, and it's organization, automation, and delegation. Right? So if organization is a problem in your business, let's say you're one of those people, you got Post-it notes all over the place, you're like constantly scratching to remember things, right? You will reach a point in your business where that becomes a real problem, right? You're missing appointments, you're missing follow-ups, you've got, you're forgetting things, and that will prevent your business from growing to a certain point. The next component is automation. That's really what we're talking about here. Are there components of your business that you're spending time doing that could be done elsewhere? for me, one of the biggest things that I did a couple of years ago is I moved to Calendly. I send out people a Calendly link. It automatically locks it in my schedule, sends a Zoom link and all that stuff. It's such a simple process, but it eliminated me having to do this back and forth with them, figure out dates, times, send things out. I automated an aspect of my tasks that were consuming a lot of my time. So that automation component. And then the other part is the delegation. And there needs to be a point in your business as it grows that you take some of these tasks that can be delegated off and hand them to somebody else so they can take them off your plate. And that will prevent you from growing your business if you don't reach that point where you can just hand some of those things off. And, you know, to add on to that, nowadays we live in a global world. So sometimes delegating doesn't mean hiring somebody full-time as a W-2 employee. It very well could be somebody freelanced. And there's some really great freelance people that you can hire across the US and also worldwide to help take some of that stuff off your plate.
Yeah, I think delegation applies beyond just SMS marketing as well in all aspects of your business, as well as the automation component too. I mean, there's like 1,000 things that I used to do that are either now delegated or they're automated, and you just have way more free time to actually focus on, I would say, brain stimulating activities, especially like the scheduling is one thing where it's just like, what's the point? Just drop the calendar link and be done with it.
Yeah, and that's one of the greatest things about Gen Z is growing up. You grew up in that generation where technology is second nature, and you look at it and say, like, why would I do it this way when there's these tools and resources out there that already exist that would fix a lot of that? And when you enter workplaces where you have old school mindsets, you sometimes have to challenge those norms and say, I get we've been doing it this way, but there's so much of a better opportunity. And I'm seeing in a lot of these businesses where the younger generation moving in is just crushing sales quotas, just performing at such a higher level because they're willing to try out these new tools and ways of doing business that the old school mindset is not. They just got comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had like an internship all the way back in high school with one of those types of companies, very large, in an industry that didn't exactly have a lot of competition either. And there were so many things that were just painful for me to do, but they were comfortable with what their setup was, and they had no interest in changing whatsoever.
That's such a deadly word in business, is comfortable, right? Because like, take solar sales, for instance. Let's take this, for instance. They're still doing a lot of door knocking. Okay. And they're making a lot of money doing it. So they're comfortable, right? If you're making money and it's paying, and you're making more money than you ever have, you're comfortable. So you're not going to look for new ways. Well, now you've got these new companies coming in saying, well, there's a tech way to do this that's a lot more efficient, and they're disrupting it. And that's really where the disruptors come in, as they say, look, I know the old way technically works, but there's a much, much better way of doing it. They disrupt the industry. And then eventually those people with that old school mindset kind of have to follow in with that.
Yeah. And I think the best thing that you can do if you're a business is open up the floor entirely for ideas and thoughts from the whole team around how things could be improved, and not stymie innovation or just trying to fit everything into the framework that you've already built. Like, having a culture of continual improvement is really important. Otherwise, people aren't going to feel as bought in either if you're just doing the same thing over and over again with no ability to affect change.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, celebrating the things that don't work out because you tried it out, right? We developed a software platform one time, cost us $50,000 to do it, and we never used it. But you know what? We learned a lot from that thing,
I hope so.
Yeah, and those type of things happen all the time, right? But that's all part of innovation, and the people that are willing to challenge that and have the culture that, like, Yeah, you make mistakes, you mess things up, but whatever, move on, keep moving on, are the ones that are really making the difference, building things that are innovative and leading the charge, right? They're not the people that are looking over their shoulder at competition going, oh God, they're coming after me. No, because they're innovating so fast, their competition can't keep up.
Yeah, I think that applies to more than just business too. Like I would rather try something and then it not work than not try it. And then because I would just be thinking like, oh, you should have done this or you should have tried this. And if I don't go for it, then I'm going to constantly have that in the back of my head. Like, oh shit, you really should have given that a go. And there's no way you're going to know unless you go for it.
No. And yes. And people have this mindset that they're a fraud, right? That they shouldn't be doing this because they're not an expert at it. Well, anytime you're challenging yourself and doing something new, you are always going to have that mindset. So it's not a bad thing, but you need to understand that you need to move past that because you're always challenging yourself. You're always starting off the beginning, and being okay with some of that discomfort is completely fine. And, take, for instance, podcasting. If you're in business and you want to start doing podcasting, in the beginning, it's going to be very uncomfortable. You're going to feel like, what am I doing right now? Like, I don't know how to do this, right? But then you'll figure it out and then you get going. And then a few months into it, you're an expert, right? Writing a book. In the very beginning, you're going to be like, well, what am I doing? There's a lot more qualified people out there to do this than I am. I'm a fraud. What am I doing? But you move past it, and then you know what happens? Eventually, you're an expert at it. And other people are reaching out to you going, how did you market your book? How did you do that? Right? Yeah. Because you're an expert, but you have to start somewhere. And if you're pushing the boundaries, you're always going to be uncomfortable and feel a little bit like a fraud.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the hesitancy around doing anything is that. But once you start doing it, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that the more you do it, the more comfortable you are with it, and the more you feel empowered to say that, oh yeah, like I actually am not terrible at this or whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It's that whole imposter syndrome thing, in the beginning, you have that imposter syndrome. And then there's another side to imposter syndrome, and that's that your family is often not the most supportive, your close friends and family, of you trying new things. And that differs. Sometimes people have family that are close to them. But I almost call it like this homemade syndrome, where your close friends and family look at what you're doing and say, well, I could never do that. How is it possible that you're doing that? And that's okay that they have that belief. You just need to move past it. And maybe you don't focus your sales, marketing, or efforts, or even tell them what you're doing until it's established, and focus outside of that close network of people. It's so common that it's all throughout history. You'll read all sorts of people that have encountered that same type of roadblock from close friends and family.
So talking through all of this, how do you get this mindset and just overall belief sort of disseminated throughout your team as you have been growing and scaling out your employees?
Yeah. So great question. So culture is incredibly important to the business. And something I like to think about all the time is, like a text messaging platform, is that in itself unique? No, there's plenty of text messaging platforms out there. A lot of the products and services that we built, are they entirely unique? No. But when you combine it with the culture that we have around customer service, the culture that we have around growth, the culture that we have around innovation, that is unique. And that is not one specific product or brand or anything. It is all encompassing. And being the leader of my company, a lot of that starts with me. I'm very upfront with the mistakes, the challenges, the beliefs that I have. And it's bred throughout my entire company. One of the examples is I talk about continuing education all the time, that we should constantly be learning. I read books every single day. I talk about it all the time. And inside my company, everyone knows that if they work for me, they can get, we pay for any continuing education they do, books, things like that, because we constantly want to be learning. Inside the company, we talk about what books we're reading. I share the ones that I'm working on. And so it is who I am. So it's bred into the company. The innovation, the thought process, the making mistakes, that's all who I am, right? So we're not a stiff company that criticizes people. We're a company that encourages making mistakes and breaking things, because that's part of our growth. And, there's times where I need to look in the mirror. Yeah, maybe I'm frustrated at somebody and say, oh, he screwed that up. I got to take a day to kind of think it over before I talk to him, because I'm human, right? But overall, that the culture of innovation is far more important to me than reprimanding somebody for an accident or something like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's shown in your business success thus far that that's a proven track record of success, and you don't need to necessarily it's like if you have I don't know if this is the best analogy to use, but you're not going to, when you have a puppy, you're not going to put its nose where it went 1,000 times or whatever the expression is. You're sure. It's like you're trying to learn and nurture and educate. And there's this whole concept around, what's the term? It's more about positive reinforcement than it is negative. I forget exactly what the vernacular is, but
with the carrot versus the stick, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. 100% agree with you. You need to be positive, and there's plenty of data and articles and all that stuff that just says this negative reinforcement model just doesn't work. It doesn't. You want to put people in their best possible scenario, and you want them to understand that mistakes happen and it's fine. They need to move on from it. If you want to develop a culture of innovation and growth, it needs to be really centered around that component. So I absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's super, super important that you have that. But at the same time, you can't just constantly be looking to do positive reinforcement. At some point, you just have to accept that maybe this isn't working out. And so how do you flip the switch from, it's all about positive reinforcement to, hey, you aren't having any accountability and we need to have a conversation here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, great question on that, because accountability is something that is inevitable in business. You will hire people, you'll have people that work for you that are not a good fit for your company. And you are not doing that person any justice by keeping them on board with you. You're not helping either party. And sometimes helping somebody find a new career path outside of your business ends up being the best thing for them long term. They wouldn't do it on their own, right? Because people want to feel safe and they want to be with a company, and they're sometimes not willing to take the jump and leave. We do weekly one-on-ones with everyone. So I do them with my team. My managers do them with their employees. And inside that, it is structured out, and it's very clear what the objectives are and what they're working on. The important thing around that is the lag and lead measures, right? So the lead measures are the things that they're working on that affect the results. But those are two different things. You're not going to hold somebody accountable directly for the results. You need to make sure that the expectations that you're setting with them are tangible lead measures that affect the lag results. And so when we sit down, we're sitting down with them, going over each week what their priorities are for the week, what's in their Trello board, for example. And then the next week, we're following up with those expectations. I want to make sure that everyone on my team knows if they're winning or losing, right? If they're doing well or not, if they're doing their job or not. And then it's about having honest conversations if they're not meeting those expectations. Is it something that we're not providing, clear direction, resources, tools, or things like that? Or is it something on your end? And if it's something on your end, then I have no choice but to hold you accountable to those expectations and potentially help you find a an opportunity somewhere else outside of the company, if that's the right direction for you.
Right. Yeah, I think that was probably one of the more challenging things for me to do, because I wanted to sort of empower and lift up all of our team members and give them more responsibility. And there's also this sort of give and take of somebody who's really strong as an individual contributor to a team isn't necessarily going to be great at like managing a team. And they might not even want that either. So it's really all about communication and making sure that you're on the same page with that team member, because you shouldn't just expect that everybody wants the same sort of trajectory with their career as you would. And so that was I would say, a learning moment for me building Electric, was understanding that and meeting people where they are and structuring things so that I'm helping them achieve their goals while also benefiting the business as well.
Yeah, there's this I don't know, philosophy or whatever that I heard that was basically you promote people up to the point where they're no longer good at their job, right? And that happens all the time, right? Where you find an individual contributor who's really great at their job, and you're like, you know what, you're so good, I'm going to give you some more employees to help you, and you're going to manage them, right? Well, just because they're good at whatever it is they were doing does not mean that they're good at managing people. Those are totally different skill sets, you know? And I've been guilty of it before in the past, promoting somebody into a position that they were terrible at, but their previous position they were great at. So when you're building an organization, you need to have roles that reward individual contributors and potentially a career path for individual contributors outside of a leadership capacity, because you can be great as an individual contributor and a great asset to the company without having to have the ability to manage people. In my world, programmers are a perfect example of that. It takes a very specific mindset to be a programmer. I've done it very briefly, but not something I could do as long-term, right? Well, that mindset, that skill set, that attitude that you have towards being a really good coder doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be great at running people. And it's often the opposite of that. So that's something you got to watch out for.
Well, this was honestly one of the more interesting podcasts that I've done thus far. So thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything, sort of last tips, suggestions that you give either for businesses on the SMS side or for other entrepreneurs listening to this as they go through and are building their own companies? Yeah,
absolutely. The thing I would say with being an entrepreneur is you constantly think that the bigger companies have it figured out, right? Be it marketing or hiring or whatever. And working with large companies, I'll tell you, they don't. Like, they're in the same thing you are. They're trying to figure out grassroots marketing strategies that work so that they don't have to pay massive ad dollars and things like that. Don't worry about this imposter syndrome of, you got to figure it out. And don't worry about trying to do things the traditional route that you think a big company is doing. It's okay to figure things out. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to keep learning and try to find different ways of doing things and thinking outside the box. And if you're an entrepreneur, that's what I would say the biggest thing that you have to be great at as an entrepreneur is being comfortable being uncomfortable, because you are constantly in a state of being uncomfortable, and that's okay. So if you feel that is something that you can achieve, being comfortable being uncomfortable, then you're going to be a great entrepreneur. Challenge the status quo, look for new opportunities, and drive success.
Oh, I love that. That's a great one. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Before we hop off, though, can you let everybody know where they can find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a podcast, the Success Is Podcast. If you go to philportman.com, philportman.com, you can follow my podcast. It also has links to the various brands that we have, from Argos Automation to X Browser to Textdrip. If one of our products or services works for you, you click on there. You can reach out and talk to a real live agent 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Thank you so much for having me today, Brandon. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Well, as always, thank you everybody for listening. I'm Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at electricmarketing.com or brandonamoroso.com. And until next time, thanks for listening.